A German archaeologist kneels in the dirt outside Baghdad. The year is 1936. He's holding something that shouldn't exist. A clay jar, a copper cylinder, an iron rod. When assembled, they produce electricity. This object is over 2,000 years old. The Baghdad Battery, either the most important archaeological discovery of the 20th century or the greatest misunderstanding. We need to talk about what this thing actually is. The jar is small, fits in your palm. Terracotta, the color of dried blood and ancient clay. Inside, a copper cylinder rolled and soldered, not welded, soldered. That detail matters. Inside the copper, an iron rod held in place by an asphalt plug at the top. The rod doesn't touch the cylinder walls. There's a gap, deliberate spacing. Wilhelm Koenig, the archaeologist who found it, recognized the design immediately. This is a galvanic cell. Add an acidic solution, vinegar, wine, anything with electrolytes, and you create a chemical reaction. Electrons flow from the iron to the copper. You get roughly 1 volt of electricity. But the Parthian Empire, the civilization that made this, existed from 250 BC to 224 AD. They had no light bulbs, no motors, no understanding of electrical theory, so why would they build a battery? Koenig had a theory. He noticed something about ancient Mesopotamian jewelry, gold-plated silver, perfect, even coating, the kind you can't achieve by hand-hammering gold leaf, but you can achieve it through electroplating. Run a current through a gold salt solution with your silver object submerged, and gold atoms deposit evenly across the surface. It's basic electrochemistry, and these ancient jewelers were doing it. That's the mystery, that's what we are trying to solve. The jars were found in Qujat Rabu, just outside Baghdad, not in a palace, not in a temple, in a village, ordinary people's territory. Alongside them, excavators found more copper cylinders, more iron rods, more clay jars of identical design. This wasn't a one-off experiment. This was a manufacturing process. Someone was making these intentionally, repeatedly, following a precise template. The dating puts them in the Parthian period, but the design shares nothing with other Parthian artifacts. The copper work is too sophisticated. The soldering technique appears nowhere else in their metallurgy. It's as if someone dropped a piece of modern technology into the ancient world and walked away. Here's where it gets strange. In 2005, the Mythbusters team decided to test Koenig's theory. They built exact replicas of the Baghdad Battery. Clay jar, copper cylinder, iron rod, asphalt seal. They filled it with lemon juice, 1 volt of electricity. Then they connected 10 of them in series, enough voltage to electroplate a small object with copper. The experiment worked. The ancient design produced measurable electrical current and could, in theory, be used for electroplating. But most archaeologists reject this conclusion entirely. They point to similar jars found across Mesopotamia used for storing sacred scrolls. Papyrus documents needed protection from moisture and decay. A clay jar with an asphalt seal does exactly that. The copper cylinder, just another layer of protection. The iron rod, a simple scroll holder, corroded over time. Nothing special, nothing electrical, just mundane storage containers that happen to look like batteries to modern eyes desperate to find ancient technology. The problem is, no scrolls were ever found inside these jars. Not fragments, not residue, nothing. If they're scroll containers, where are the scrolls? The counter-argument goes like this. Organic materials decay, papyrus disintegrates. Just because we don't find evidence doesn't mean it wasn't there. Absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence. These jars could have held scrolls for centuries before the papyrus turned to dust, leaving only the container behind. Fair point, but it doesn't explain the copper soldering. It doesn't explain the iron rod spacing. It doesn't explain why someone would go through the trouble of creating such a precise, sealed container for something as simple as scroll storage, when cheaper, easier methods existed throughout the ancient world. Here's what we know for certain. The Baghdad Battery produces electricity, that's not disputed. Hook it to a voltmeter and the needle moves. The question isn't whether it works. The question is whether the Parthians knew it worked. And here's the thing that keeps me up at night. Ancient Mesopotamian texts reference something called the fire without flame, mysterious lights that illuminated temple chambers without smoke or heat. For centuries, historians assumed this was either poetic metaphor or primitive oil lamps with exceptionally clean wicks. But what if it wasn't? What if they actually had electric lights? You'd need more than one battery. You'd need dozens, maybe hundreds, wired in series to produce enough voltage for even a dim glow. But the Parthians had copper mines. They had iron. They had access to acidic liquids. They had the manufacturing capability. And we've found multiple examples of these jars, not just one. Is it possible? Technically, yes. Is it probable? That's where the archaeological community splits. The strongest evidence against the battery theory is this: no wires, no ancient electrical infrastructure, no copper cables, no connection points, no residue of an electrical grid. If the Parthians were using electricity on any meaningful scale, we should find traces of that system. We don't. The strongest evidence for the battery theory is this: it works. It produces electricity using materials and techniques the Parthians absolutely possessed. And while we haven't found wires, we also haven't excavated 99% of Parthian sites. The absence of evidence could simply be the absence of excavation. In 2003, the Baghdad Museum was looted during the Iraq War. The original Baghdad Battery, along with several others, disappeared. Some were recovered, some are still missing. The most complete specimen, the one Koenig originally studied, is gone. We are left with photographs, replicas, and second-hand accounts. The physical evidence that could settle this debate is scattered or destroyed. What we are left with is a choice. Do we believe the simplest explanation, that these are storage vessels misidentified by enthusiastic archaeologists looking for ancient wonders? Or do we accept that ancient civilizations might have understood more about the natural world than we give them credit for? The truth is probably somewhere in the middle. The Parthians might not have understood electricity the way we do. They didn't have electromagnetic theory or equations or any framework for comprehending what they were creating. But they didn't need to. You don't need to understand quantum mechanics to notice that rubbing amber against wool creates a strange attracting force. You don't need modern chemistry to observe that certain metal combinations in acidic solutions produce unusual effects. They could have stumbled onto electroplating the same way ancient glassmakers stumbled onto transparent glass, by accident, by experimentation, by trial and error over generations. Someone noticed gold depositing more evenly when certain conditions were met. Someone refined the process. Someone built a tool to make it easier, and that tool looked like a battery. Whether they called it a battery, whether they understood the science, whether they even recognized it as the same phenomenon that makes lightning strike, doesn't matter. What matters is whether they used it, and the electroplated jewelry suggests they did. So here's my answer to the question that started this. Is the Baghdad Battery evidence of ancient electricity? Yes and no. It's evidence that ancient people could produce electrical current. It's evidence they had the materials and techniques. It's circumstantial evidence they might have used it for metalworking. But it's not evidence of power grids, ancient computers, or lost civilizations with technology rivaling our own. It's evidence of something more interesting: human ingenuity working without a roadmap, finding solutions through experimentation rather than theory, building tools they didn't fully understand but knew how to use. That's how most technology develops, even now. We use things before we understand them. Understanding comes later, if it comes at all. The Baghdad Battery is a reminder that ancient doesn't mean primitive. These people weren't waiting for the modern world to teach them how to think. They were solving problems with the materials they had, creating technologies that worked even if they couldn't explain why. And sometimes that's enough.